5 killers still walk free in these mountains, and locals refuse to talk about why police stopped searching. The Appalachian Trail stretches over 2,000 miles through some of America's most beautiful wilderness. Millions of hikers tackle sections of it every year. Most come back with stories about stunning sunrises and aching feet. Scott Lilly should have been one of them. In September 2011, the 30-year-old set out from Maryland with his backpack and hiking boots, ready to experience the trail that calls to adventurers from around the world. He was doing what thousands do every year, disconnecting from the world and reconnecting with nature. Simple enough, right? Well, things went horribly wrong. Weeks into his journey, other hikers made a discovery that would haunt them forever. They found Scott's body in the woods near Cow Camp Gap Shelter in Virginia. He wasn't resting, he wasn't injured from a fall. He was dead. The cause of death hit investigators like a punch to the gut, asphyxia by suffocation. Someone had deliberately killed this young man in one of the most peaceful places on earth. But here's where it gets even stranger. His belongings were completely gone. Backpack, gear, everything. Vanished. The FBI stepped in fast. When a hiker gets murdered on a trail that crosses multiple states, it becomes their problem. They launched an investigation that should have been straightforward. After all, how hard could it be to track down a killer on a well-traveled hiking trail? Turns out, pretty damn hard. The agents never confirmed whether robbery was the main motive. Think about that for a second. If someone kills you for your hiking gear, that's bad enough. But if they kill you and then take your stuff as an afterthought, that's a whole different kind of terrifying. The Appalachian Trail isn't exactly Times Square. You can hike for hours without seeing another soul. Perfect for meditation and soul-searching. Also perfect for someone with darker intentions. The isolation that draws people to the trail becomes a nightmare when the wrong person shows up. Scott had started his hike in Maryland, probably excited about the adventure ahead. Maybe he'd planned to hike a few hundred miles, or maybe he was going for the full trail. We'll never know because someone cut his journey short in the most brutal way possible. The case remains unsolved today. No arrests, no suspects publicly named, no closure for Scott's family, just questions that multiply like weeds in an abandoned garden. And the weird part is, Scott's murder wasn't an isolated incident on America's most famous hiking trail. The FBI files contain other cases that share disturbing similarities. Different locations, different years, but the same sense that something predatory stalks these ancient mountains. The Appalachian wilderness holds secrets older than the mountains themselves. Some of those secrets involve people who never made it home from their hiking adventures. People who encountered something far more dangerous than bears or rattlesnakes. Then there's what happened to Louise Chaput in New Hampshire's White Mountains, where another routine hike turned into a family's worst nightmare. The White Mountains of New Hampshire look peaceful enough, rolling hills, clear streams, and hiking trails that attract thousands every year. But in November 2001, these serene woods became the backdrop for something truly horrific. Louise Chaput was 52 and loved the outdoors. She drove down from Quebec, Canada, planning a solo hike on the Lost Pond Trail. Nothing too ambitious, just a day trip near the Appalachian Mountain Club's Pinkham Notch Visitor Center. The area stays busy with hikers, families, and tourists. Safe territory, or so everyone thought. Chaput checked in at the lodge and headed out that crisp November morning. She never came back. For days, search teams combed the forest. Volunteers, park rangers, and local police spread out across miles of wilderness. The weather was getting colder. Hope was fading fast. Then came Thanksgiving Day. A search team found her body in the woods, not far from where she'd started her hike. But this wasn't a case of someone getting lost or injured. Louise Chaput had been stabbed multiple times. Someone had murdered her in broad daylight, practically within shouting distance of a busy mountain lodge. Here's what makes this case so disturbing. The Lost Pond Trail isn't some remote backcountry route. People hike it regularly. The AMC Lodge sees hundreds of visitors during peak season. Yet somehow a killer managed to attack and murder Chaput without anyone seeing or hearing anything suspicious. Well, that's what the police thought initially. The investigation kicked into high gear immediately. New Hampshire State Police treated it as their top priority. They interviewed hikers, lodge staff, and anyone who might have been in the area. They analyzed the crime scene for DNA evidence, fingerprints, and any clues the killer might have left behind. They even brought in the FBI to help with the forensics, but the case went cold faster than a New Hampshire winter. No witnesses came forward, no solid physical evidence pointed to a specific suspect, The killer had seemingly vanished into the mountains without a trace. Makes you wonder how someone commits such a violent crime in a relatively populated area and just disappears, right? Then there's the timing issue that investigators found puzzling. November isn't peak hiking season in New Hampshire, the weather's unpredictable, daylight hours are shorter, and most casual hikers stay home. So who else was out there that day? Someone familiar with the terrain, perhaps, someone who knew the area well enough to strike quickly and escape undetected. Louise Chaput's murder remains one of New Hampshire's most baffling cold cases. 20-plus years later, no arrests have been made. No suspects publicly named, her family still waits for answers that may never come. And the weird part is, this wasn't an isolated incident in the Appalachian region, because just a few years earlier, another shocking double murder had rocked the hiking community even harder. The year 1996 brought one of the most chilling cases to ever hit the Appalachian Trail. Two young women, Julianne Williams and Lolly Winans, decided to spend some time camping together near Shenandoah National Park. Both were in their 20s, full of life and looking forward to a peaceful getaway in the mountains. What happened next would shake the hiking community to its core. The women had set up camp just off the Appalachian Trail in what should have been a relatively safe area. We're not talking about some remote wilderness here. This spot was close to bars, resorts, and tourist areas. People were around. Makes sense that they'd feel secure, right? Well, that sense of security would prove tragically false. When their bodies were discovered, investigators found both women had been tied up and murdered. The brutality of the scene was something that seasoned detectives struggled to process. Here were two innocent hikers who had simply wanted to enjoy nature, and someone had turned their peaceful retreat into a nightmare. The FBI immediately launched one of their largest investigations in the region's history. Agents flooded the area, interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence, and following every possible lead. They knew this wasn't some random act of violence. The methodical nature of the crime suggested someone who had planned this carefully, but here's where things get frustrating for everyone involved. Despite all the resources, all the interviews, and all the forensic work, the FBI never named a definitive suspect. Think about that for a moment. Two young women murdered near a busy tourist area, and somehow the killer just vanished into thin air. The investigation consumed thousands of hours and countless resources, yet the case file remains open to this day. The proximity to tourist areas made this case even more unsettling. This wasn't happening in some isolated mountain peak where help was days away. Bars and resorts were practically within walking distance, filled with people who could have potentially witnessed something suspicious, yet nobody saw the killer coming or going. It's like they materialized from the forest itself, committed these horrific acts, and then dissolved back into the wilderness. The families of Julianne and Lolly have spent decades without answers. Every lead that seemed promising eventually went cold. Every suspect that looked viable eventually got cleared. The case became a haunting reminder that even in our connected modern world, someone can commit terrible crimes and simply disappear. But the Shenandoah double homicide wasn't happening in isolation. While the FBI was pouring resources into this investigation, other disturbing cases were emerging across the Appalachian region. The pattern was becoming harder to ignore, and investigators started wondering if they were dealing with something much larger than isolated incidents. What makes this even more intriguing is how this case connects to other mysterious disappearances that were happening hundreds of miles away. Sometimes the most puzzling cases are the ones that seem completely disconnected from everything else, until you dig deeper and start seeing the threads that bind them together. What happens when someone vanishes from a busy city street and ends up dead in mountain wilderness 400 miles away? This wasn't some weekend hiking trip gone wrong, this was something far more sinister. July 5, 1997. Judy Smith, 50 years old, was supposed to be enjoying a nice vacation in Philadelphia with her husband Jeffrey. They'd planned the whole thing out, see the sights, maybe catch a show. They'd planned the whole thing out, see the sights, maybe catch a show. Normal tourist stuff. But when Jeffrey left their hotel room around 9:30 a.m. to grab some breakfast, Judy was still there getting ready. When he came back, gone. Her purse sat on the dresser. Her clothes hung in the closet. Even her prescription medication remained untouched on the nightstand. Nobody just walks away from their heart medication, right? Jeffrey immediately called police. They launched a search through downtown Philadelphia, checked hospitals, questioned hotel staff. Nothing. Judy Smith had simply evaporated. Here's where things get really weird. 6 months later in September, Two hikers stumbled across scattered human remains in Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. Deep in the woods, near a remote campground called Doughton Park, DNA testing would eventually confirm what seemed impossible. These bones belonged to Judy Smith from Philadelphia, but wait, it gets stranger. The remains were found in an area that required serious hiking knowledge to access. Not exactly where a middle-aged tourist from Philadelphia would end up by accident. Some bones showed clear evidence of trauma, others had been scattered by wildlife over the months. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide, but couldn't determine the exact cause of death due to decomposition. Then there's the timeline problem that keeps investigators scratching their heads. How does someone disappear from a Philadelphia hotel room and end up murdered in North Carolina wilderness? Did she go willingly? Was she kidnapped and transported hundreds of miles south? The FBI found no evidence she'd ever been to North Carolina before. Local authorities noticed something else troubling. The location where Judy's remains were discovered fit a pattern they'd been tracking. Other unsolved murders along Appalachian trails, similar victim profiles, similar remote dump sites. Some investigators started wondering if they were dealing with a serial predator who used the mountain trail system as his hunting ground. The case took another bizarre turn when detectives discovered Judy had withdrawn money from her bank account after she'd supposedly vanished from Philadelphia. Security footage was too grainy to be useful. Was she alive and traveling south under duress, or had someone else gained access to her accounts? Jeffrey Smith hired private investigators. They spent thousands of dollars chasing leads that went nowhere. One theory suggested Judy might have been lured away from the hotel by someone she trusted. Another pointed to human trafficking networks that moved victims along interstate corridors. What makes Judy's case particularly unsettling is how it connects to other Appalachian murders through methodology rather than evidence. The remote location, the scattered remains, the complete lack of witnesses or physical clues. But Judy Smith wasn't the only person whose death would raise questions about a possible predator stalking the Appalachian region. Another case would surface that shared disturbing similarities. Michael Scott Lewis had everything going for him in 2007. The 27-year-old was living in South Daytona, working steadily and planning his future. Then one day he simply vanished. No dramatic goodbye, no note left behind, just gone. His disappearance didn't make headlines initially. Young men go missing all the time, right? Maybe he needed space. Maybe he was dealing with personal issues. His family waited. They hoped. They searched. What they found months later would haunt them forever. Black garbage bags floating in the Tomoka River. Inside, Michael's dismembered remains. But here's where this case gets truly disturbing. His head was never recovered. Someone had taken great care to ensure Michael Lewis could never be fully laid to rest. The location struck investigators as oddly familiar. The Tomoka River runs through terrain that connects to the greater Appalachian region. Dense forests, remote camping areas, perfect hunting grounds for someone with very specific intentions. Authorities immediately noticed similarities to other unsolved cases scattered throughout the Southeast. The methodical dismemberment, the disposal near waterways, the complete absence of witnesses or meaningful evidence. Well, except for one chilling detail. The killer had used a saw, not a knife or hatchet like you'd expect from a crime of passion. A saw suggests planning, preparation, experience. Makes you wonder how many times someone had done this before, doesn't it? Then there's the missing head issue. Investigators have theories, none of them comforting. Serial killers sometimes keep trophies, others remove heads to prevent dental identification. In Michael's case, the motive remains as mysterious as the killer. The FBI quietly began connecting dots between Michael's murder and other unsolved cases in the region. Similar disposal methods, similar victim profiles. Young people who trusted easily, traveled alone, or found themselves vulnerable in remote areas. But the weird part is how Michael ended up in that river in the first place. He disappeared from South Daytona. Not exactly hiking country. Someone either lured him to the disposal site or transported his body there after the murder. Both scenarios suggest a killer comfortable operating across state lines. Local authorities interviewed dozens of people. They followed leads that went nowhere. They examined every piece of physical evidence, which wasn't much. The river had washed away most forensic clues, probably by design. Years passed without arrests, without suspects, without answers for Michael's family, who still don't know why their son was targeted or who destroyed their lives so brutally. What makes this case particularly unsettling is its connection to a larger pattern. Multiple law enforcement agencies now believe an unidentified predator has been operating throughout Appalachian regions for decades. Someone who knows these mountains, these rivers, these perfect hiding spots. Michael Lewis represents just one piece of a horrifying puzzle. His killer remains free, possibly hunting again, while families across the Southeast live with questions that may never be answered. These mountains hold secrets darker than anyone wants to admit, and somewhere among them, a monster continues to walk free.